Good morning and welcome to the Williamson County Chamber, the Public Affairs Roundtable. I'm Dave Crouch. We have with us this morning our state legislators from Williamson County, Senator Jack Johnson, Representative Charles Sargent, Representative Glenn Cassida, and Representative, Jeremy Durham. Get it all out here in a minute. And our guest host this morning, our superintendent of the county school system, or director of the county school system, Mike Looney. We're happy to have him with us this morning. As we mentioned last month, this show is going to have a focus on education and what the state legislature did this past session to focus on education. And time permitting, we will do a wrap-up of any other issues that might have cropped up there at the last minute as they wound up their session. But first of all, this morning, we want to tackle three or four of the main issues that affected our education system in the state. And the first one being one that actually came out of Williamson County. I think it was the brainchild of our school board here, called affectionately the High Performing School Districts Act. And Mr. Mike, Dr. Looney, I should say, would you explain what the thought was behind that act and what you were looking for as a county school system? And then I'd like to bring it back to our state representatives and see what the political angles were from that side.
Certainly, I'd like to thank our delegation for supporting that bill, and specifically Jack and Charles for sponsoring it. The vision of the bill actually came as a result of frustration for a district such as ours and Franklin Special as well. We believe that we're doing a lot of things really, really well. Obviously, our results indicate that we're doing some things well, and it appears in the last couple of years we've had a lot of both federal mandates coming down to the local level and honestly state mandates coming to the local level, and we kind of felt like we were operating on quicksand. So we wanted to put something out there that would give us some autonomy and flexibility, some local control about how we go about doing the business in Williamson County. And so the vision behind the bill was really kind of defensive, but it has some really good things in it. It gives us some flexibility that we otherwise would not have. As an example, just most recently we had to hire 2 teachers at the end of the school year because we went over the class cap. 6 weeks of school left, or actually it was about 4 weeks of school left, and the current law doesn't allow for us to get an exemption or a waiver for that. We had to hire 2 teachers, although there's no way we were going to split classes at that time of year. And this bill will allow us to seek a waiver. It gives the state superintendent or the state commissioner of education the express authority to waive a law that would prohibit us from doing that. And there's a number of other scenarios. It gives us some financial flexibility. It allows us to do business quicker, more responsively rather than reactively in the way we move forward. But I think it's a good bill. It's going to affect some of the best performing school districts in the state, and we were glad to be part of it.
Okay. Senator Johnson, what was the talk behind that bill in your area? And
sure.
What can you offer us on your side of the fence?
No, it's a great bill. It's a great piece of legislation, and it's an example of the things that we try to deal with up there with regards to education. It's important for the viewers of this program to know that Tennessee is 46th in the nation in terms of public school performance. We are doing a horrible job as a state in public education. Having said that, Williamson County Schools and Franklin Special Schools are 2 of the finest school systems in the nation. And so the dilemma that we face as your delegation is to try to work with our colleagues in state government to try to improve public education as a state for the state of Tennessee, while at the same time preserving or providing as much autonomy as we can for our local school systems. We believe in local control. We believe that the best government is that government that is closest to the people, be that the city council, the county commission, or the school board. And so, and in Williamson County, on all those levels, our governments are doing it very, very well. But when it comes to education, there are some systems in this state that are not performing. It may not be through any fault of their own. It may be socioeconomic issues. It could be geographic issues. There are any number of reasons why we have systems in this state that are not performing well. But whatever those reasons, they are political subdivisions of this state, and they are accountable to the state. So on one hand, we're providing higher accountability, stricter standards for these political subdivisions with regards to education. But we need to have a system, such as was provided with this legislation, to say, for those systems like Franklin Special and Williamson County that are performing well and doing a good job, let's leave them alone. They're meeting the accountability standards that we have set as a state. So I actually expect us to look at more possibilities for us to provide some autonomy and some flexibility to those school systems that are doing it right, because whether we like it or not, education reform is here to stay in this state. It's not going away. And we're going to continue to look at different types of mechanisms, different types of ways we can improve education in this state. But while we do that, we need to leave those high-performing districts like Williamson County and Franklin Special alone to the greatest extent possible.
Okay. Mr. Sargent?
Thank you. Thank you for having us again. It's great to be here when you're out of sessions. It's a little more relaxed for all of us as far as that's concerned.
Well, so far, Charles, it's early in the program.
But I want to thank Dr. Looney and Dr. Snowden. I know it came out from Williamson County, but we are very fortunate here in Williamson County to have the school system we have. The county commission, the funding boards, always do the right thing when we come trying to fund our educational system. You know, it doesn't matter if it's just in instructional or if it's in capital outlay money. One of the things the bill did have that we had to work out was a little more flexibility on how a school board could move money around in different categories. And working with both of the directors, we were able to work all that out, and you know, so it was not a problem. But normally up there, you hear about all the failing school districts. You hear about it all the time. It's always about them. And we need to make a mark here and talk about the high-performing school districts. There are, right now, we think there's going to be 21 school districts out of 135 that will fall under this act. And they are all extremely happy of what we did. And they're saying we need to do more of this for the high-performing school districts. There's some rules and regulations that we don't need to be under. And these are the things that I think, you know, in the future, we're going to hear about, like Jack said, Senator said, we're going to hear about education. Education is going to be the main focus for the next 5 or 6 years under Governor Haslam. He's bound and determined to make an improvement, not just in K through 12, but in higher ed also. So this is one of his goals. So we're going to hear about it, but at the same time, we need to make sure our high-performance school districts get the flexibility and also get the funding as far as that's concerned. Here in Williamson County, every year, 2 years, we're building 1, 2, 3 schools sometimes. And the state puts very little money into capital improvements or capital money into the budget. So we need to make sure we protect the availability of funds so we can have our new schools. You know, there's a lot of school districts that probably haven't built a school in 20 or 30 years, 40 years. But with the growth in Williamson County, we need to make sure we get this and get this funding correctly because the county commission, I know in the county side, does an excellent job on school buildings and things of that nature. And we have to be very protective of making sure that we don't do anything to disrupt that in any way, shape, form, or fashion. So I do thank you for bringing that. A lot of other legislators in Blount County and Sevierville and Alcoa, they all loved it. And it makes a difference when you have several other legislators throughout the state saying, you know, this is a great bill. And so no one, you know, basically, you know, didn't fight the bill, but they all talk about the underperforming school districts. And we need to get it changed around to say everyone should try to achieve what Williamson and Franklin Special achieves. And we wouldn't have all these failing school districts if they did the job that, you know, we do here in Williamson County. So, I mean, it was an excellent bill.
Thank you, Charles. Mr. Castor?
First, thank you again for doing this, especially the Chamber. This is an excellent way for us to reach out to our community. And the Chamber does a very good job of reaching out to the business community and the county as a whole. So this is an excellent forum. Thank you. And, you know, this education bill, Dave, was very similar to many things we face in the legislature as the Williamson County delegation. Another example that's an analogy to this is the annexation bill. I've been in legislature 12 years and I've yet to hear anyone complain about annexation by the cities in Williamson County. And so that's when we attempted to try to exempt Williamson County out of, failed, because across the state, this is a problem. And so that's yet again a dilemma. How do we keep things good and keep them on the course that we're on in Williamson County, yet help the rest of the state? And it's a challenge. And but this was an excellent piece of legislation. It's proud to be co-sponsor. It affected positively 16 other school districts. I think there'll be some good things come out of this.
Great. Mr. Durham?
This was just good public policy. When people are given a task to achieve these objective results, and that would give them more flexibility, that creates a definite incentive for them to make sure that our children are doing as well as they can in schools. So I was happy to support it. I think both of our school districts do a great job, and now they can get back to what they do best, and they have more freedom in how they do that.
Dr. Looney, it sounds like this bill was mostly about financial flexibility and being able to make adjustments. Is there a shopping list of other things you would like to add to this going forward in a future bill?
Yes, sir. My suspicion, and it's not just about financial flexibility, but it certainly includes that. The bill is actually written where we can request a waiver from any state law or regulation if we think it benefits us. Right. Now, the real test is going to be what is the commissioner's appetite to waive those laws and regulations. So I do think that moving forward, we'll get lots of other ideas, both from sister districts and from locally, about how we might add some meat to the bone on that bill. But I think it's a very good beginning. Well, we have been focused both on teacher class size and on the evaluation system. And as you know, we have a little bit of, hopefully, flexibility in those areas. Those are the first two things that come to mind.
Okay. The next thing on my list this morning is what is referred to as the Charter Authorizer Bill. And charter schools and vouchers seem to me to be wrapped up somewhat together. And I know that we have had an application for a charter school here in Williamson County that was not approved. And this bill really doesn't affect our ability to make those decisions here in the county, as I understand it. But would you mind telling us, Dr. Looney, the county's, our school board's position on charter schools and what you would like to see and how this bill has affected us, if at all?
Well, thank you for the question, and certainly our school board has actually taken a formal position on that, and that is they want to preserve local control. We believe that the school board is elected locally by citizenry, and they know best what's best for Williamson County schools moving forward. So we've maintained a position where we feel like we should have local control, and outsiders shouldn't be making a decision whether or not a charter school comes to Williamson County. The reality of it is both charters and vouchers, and this is a hotly debated topic across the state and in many states, to be honest with you. But Williamson County, while we're a very affluent community, the truth is we spend very few dollars relative to the rest of the state on public education. And anytime you bring in people to take away from the limited resources that you have and start spreading that out, you know, if you open a charter school, then you've got administration that you got to deal with. You got to hire a new set of teachers. You got to have building space, et cetera, transportation, right, food service, and so you're diluting the dollars, the precious dollars that we already have, and that complicates things. You know, more importantly, we can't be everything to everybody. The fact of the matter is that public schools are directly tied to the economic development of the county, and it's our belief that we do a phenomenal job with that. And while, you know, there are claims to be made that public schools not for everybody, that's probably true, but there are lots of other options without diluting the few precious resources that we currently have.
Right. And the Chamber's interest in education in general is because the education system in Williamson County has been such a draw, you know, to bring people to Williamson County, businesses to Williamson County, and we're very interested in seeing our school systems here be successful. But Senator Johnson, how do you see that from a statewide view, and how do you handle that to make Williamson County schools the best, but craft laws that will work across our state?
Sure. Well, it's a great issue, and I'm glad actually that as a state we're having this debate, this conversation, if you will, because it certainly dovetails into the previous conversation. And you know, we don't need the same solutions in every district and every county of the state as you know, you can't paint with a broad brush, so to speak. And the needs in Williamson County are far different than the needs in inner city Memphis or in Perry County, in some of your rural areas that are out there. You know, it's interesting in the General Assembly, the philosophical range is very broad, because there are folks in the General Assembly who believe that every tax dollar should follow the child wherever they want to go, whether that's homeschooling, private school, charter, wherever the case may be. And then there are those who think that there should be no options whatsoever. And I think that the answer is somewhere in the middle. The final version of the bill that passed the House, it was not voted on in the Senate with regards to the statewide authorizer, would have affected 5 counties. Williamson County was not one of those. And had it come for a vote, I would have voted for it. I believe my colleagues voted for it in the House whenever it did come up for a vote. It's, again, one of those issues where I do think vouchers, a form of vouchers, and charter schools are an option that should be on the table for certain parts of the state. The current law reads that if a district is not fulfilling a particular need for its students, that they should look at approving a charter. As the parent of 3 kids in Williamson County schools, I believe that all needs are being met in Williamson County at this time. And this ridiculous charter application that was recently submitted is a perfect example of that. And it was appropriately denied. And that denial was certainly within the confines of state law, because there was not a need identified that was not being met. Mm-hmm. The authorizer bill came about because of the highly publicized debate in Nashville over a charter application that was denied by the Metro School Board. And the State Board of Education felt like that denial was a violation of state law, because they felt that there was a need there that was to be filled by the charter school that was not being met by the school board. Now, some people agree or disagree with that decision. They take Metro's side, and some people take the state board side. But that's where that district was fined $3 million. And the governor, the Speaker of the House, and the Lieutenant Governor, and many in the General Assembly said that we think we need an additional tool out there when a denial is made in violation of state law. And that's what this bill, or the bill that came to the House floor and was not voted on in the Senate, I expect it will come back next year, would have provided for a mechanism to compel that district to approve a charter school if it's in one of those 5 counties.
Okay.
I think the senator did an excellent job in just explaining that. But there again,
Right.
Go back to the high performance school district. There's only 21 districts that are going to qualify for that. On the other hand, in the low performance school districts, there's only going to be 5 that would make it a mandatory situation. Right. So, like I said originally, the governor is determined to make a difference in education, and he understands the difference between a Williamson County school and, say, a Memphis City school. So he wants to fit the appropriate bills and the appropriate way to do it within these counties and these districts.
Right. Now, Glenn, you've had a little different take on the charter schools and vouchers than maybe our school board would have. How do you see these things?
You know, and I think the delegation is pretty unanimous. We do support charter schools. As a matter of fact, we're on our 3rd generation of losing children. There's a lot of children in the state that are not being educated, and those parents want options. The governor and the commissioner of education and this delegation support that concept. And so I'm a supporter of charter schools, yes.
Okay. Mr. Durham?
I believe that parents, not the government, should educate a child. I will say that I think it's well documented that I campaigned very hard last summer and knocked on lots and lots of doors. I think that people are satisfied in Williamson County. Jessica and I moved to Williamson County because of the schools. That is where we wanted to have a family, because of the schools. I think people are very happy with what they have. Mm-hmm. So it'll probably have to be a case-by-case situation with me. I was happy, just like Senator Johnson said, that the bill that we were voting on this year only applied to 5 counties. The Speaker of the House has made that. I mean, she's pretty much the mother of charter schools in Tennessee. Mm-hmm. So it's definitely going to come back up again. But I think it's very important to remember that people in Williamson County do express satisfaction when they talk about the current state of their schools. But when it comes down to principle, you have to remember that the parents are the ones who are paying taxes. So you have to always keep in mind that it really is their right to educate their child. So, right. I mean, I think I agree with what everybody here is saying. But you always have to remember what county you represent when you're dealing with all these broad principles, and that's all that's all that I want to add.
Dr. Winnie, any comments, final comments on that subject?
Well, my encouragement to the delegation is simply that what we're doing in Williamson County appears to be working, and while I certainly respect the notion that the delegation has to consider the whole state, my plea would be our elected school board, I think, represents the views of most Williamson County school parents.
Right.
And to take away the decision about a charter authorized from the local board that's elected locally, I think would be a huge mistake. Mm-hmm. There may be school boards that are dysfunctional across the state, but we're not one of them.
Right.
And so, we're not saying there shouldn't be charter school applications. We're saying the decision should rest with the local school board, and the bill that was being proposed and deliberated on took that authority ultimately away from the local school board.
Right.
And it gave it to an appointed panel. And so our school board stood opposed to that.
Right.
We feel like we can make decisions that are in the best interest of the boys and girls of Williamson County. End of story.
Right. Sounds like needs to be tied to performance too, and that's what you all did with it, so probably appropriately. Now, Dr. David Snowden gave me some advice a while back that he says he gives to some of his principals sometimes, and he says, when you fess up, mess up. No, when you mess up, fess up. Got it backwards. But certainly one of our high-performing school districts in this county is the Franklin Special School District, and I see Dr. David Snowden in the audience, and he chose not to be in the spotlight up here this morning, but I do want you to come up and talk about the high-performing school districts. I meant to come back to you a minute ago, and I didn't. But is there anything in that area that the special school district would like to see, or that is going to benefit from the legislation that was just recently passed?
Thank you, Dave. You didn't mess up either. So, no, we're excited to help support that bill that Williamson County brought forward. We think it is a good bill. As Mike alluded to earlier, it gives more financial freedom to county school districts versus our school district, or special school districts or city school districts. However, we do think that it offers some opportunity for waivers for rules and regulations that currently bind us, and so I think it is, obviously, as all of you have agreed, it's good legislation, and I think it can even be improved upon going forward. Right now, as Mike alluded to earlier, we are concentrating on the evaluation system. We already had some flexibility. As I understand it, this new legislation allows us to have that flexibility without asking additional permission. So all those things are important, I think, in school districts to have some flexibility if we're meeting the standards that are set forth.
Right. Sounds like you are, and Dr. Looney's system is as well. One of the subjects that seems to have been a hot topic around the county here recently are textbooks, Dr. Looney. And without getting into the specific textbook that seems to have attracted so much attention, which I don't think we've got time to read that textbook here today, but tell us how the textbook selection process works. For instance, in the human geography situation. How many textbooks are there available out there in a typical situation like that for the county to choose from? How do you make those decisions? And then I want to come back to our state representatives to explain how that works from the state side as well.
Sure, and so the way the process works, the state goes through a vetting process and comes up with a list of textbooks that are suitable according to the state curriculum for school systems to choose from. And then local school districts have textbook committees comprised of primarily teachers, but citizens as well. And they go through a review process and select from the narrowed list of available resources. I believe in the human geography textbook that we're speaking of, which is a college level course, it's an AP course. I think there were 2 or 3 textbooks to choose from.
How many people are on that committee, and how's it made up again?
On our local textbook committee,
Right.
It's representatives from each school community. I can't tell you a specific number.
Okay.
We do have a public review process that's out there. I will say the public review process is, in my opinion, can be improved. The textbooks are all housed in a central or regional areas across the state, and I think ours is in Murfreesboro, so we've already put some processes in place to improve that. I would say this is another example of, instead of top-down decision-making, we might should consider bottom-up decision-making, so allowing the teachers of the courses to make recommendations to the state in advance of them narrowing the list. So I think there's some potential of improvement in the process. But we're going through the process of reviewing that particular textbook, and the committee is actually reading the entire textbook now. So I'm glad I'm not on that committee right now, but we have a process in place.
Right. Senator Johnson, how does that work from the state side of the?
Sure, it's similar. At the state level, we have what's referred to as the State Textbook Commission, and this is it's a governmental body with appointed people that serve on it, and I'm not sure who appoints the people or how that appointing authority works, but it's folks that review these, and as Dr. Looney said, basically come up with a list of textbooks from which local districts can choose with their local committees. Here's the good news, and we have met, I know all 4 of us have met because of some of the recent publicity with some parents who have pointed out some things that they don't believe are historically accurate, or perhaps you might read it such that there's a particular political agenda that's in there. And some of that is subjective. Some of it's not so subjective. Some of it's been pointed out to me, and again, as the father of 3 kids coming up, it's something that I'm not sure that's how I would teach that subject matter to my kids. But the good news is the Textbook Commission is up for a sunset review at this very time, and that's how our government works. And believe it or not, sometimes government does work. And every entity, every political entity, or governmental entity at the state level is on a sunset cycle, which means that it has to be reviewed and reauthorized. And if it's not, that particular entity goes away. And we use that as a government sometimes to do away with particular governmental entities, replace them, or maybe not replace them. The Textbook Commission is up for sunset review right now. I'm not on the committee that does those hearings, but I've been invited to attend to have members of the Textbook Commission come before that committee, and we will be asking some very tough questions with regards to their process and how they pick these textbooks. So, and we will either do away with the Textbook Commission, reconstitute them, or maybe just change who's appointed, who's serving on that particular commission, so that we make sure that we're getting good at the state level. And then Dr. Looney referred to how it takes place at the local level. The key thing here, it's something that Representative Durham pointed out, it's parental involvement. And I think the more parental involvement you have, the better. And so we're going to use these mechanisms that currently exist within government, both at the state and local level, to engage more parents and work with our school board members. And let's make sure we've got the best textbooks we can get.
I agree how that works. I know several years ago, and I tried to look back in my records, that there was a lady here in Williamson County that was on the state board. She asked, and I don't know if it was 12 years ago, but I had her appointed to the state board. And so she was one of the people at the state level that read all these textbooks and then made a recommendation. Then that list came down to local level, and they read the textbooks or did the recommendations of the state. So there is a in place, and I think we're going to have to look at it more closely. And hopefully that what come up in the last 90 days, 120 days, that if there is an opportunity for us, or four of us, to place a person on that state text board committee, we'd love to do it. And not to try to take the blame away from us, but there's only so much we can do, and we have to rely on the people that are on these different committees. So, you know, and I look at Dr. Snowden, Dr. Looney, you know, to turn around and say, well, who would be good on the state text board committee? You know, I mean, I could pick a teacher, but I don't know if that would be the correct way of doing it. So I have to look at the boards and the two directors to, you know, get their input and advice on that. And, you know, and I think we realize there's possibly a problem on some of the textbooks. So we're going to look at it, study it, and figure out a way of doing it.
Well, I can't imagine that you have time to read all those textbooks, Charles. So.
Believe me, I wouldn't.
But fortunately, Dave, I am on that committee. Government Operations oversees this, and the chairman of the committee is concerned about this as well. I mean, this is not just a Williamson County issue. This is in textbooks all across the state. And 3 books are recommended to our local governments, and then they pick one of those. And so our concern as legislators is the commission that makes the 3 recommendations. Why are they picking the textbooks that they are? And so we will be having hearings and discovering how to maybe even reconstitute that commission so that academic books are picked, and books that do not have a specific political agenda are not picked. And so that's my charge and that's my goal. But I'll say this is why it's so important for all of us to be involved in government at every level, because I would not have known this had existed if parents hadn't come to us. And so my encouragement to everyone here and that's listening to this is get involved in your government.
Mr. Durham?
That's the last thing that Representative Cassidy said is exactly what I was going to say. On this issue, parents have done a great job breaking through and getting their voices heard. When I talk to other legislators that I'm friends with around the state, this is what they're talking about, is textbooks and just things along these lines. So whatever the parents are doing to be heard, they're doing a good job of it.
Good deal. There's one more bill that was passed in this past session that allows certain teachers to carry guns in school. And Dr. Looney, I guess being I think once a Marine, always a Marine, so you're still a Marine. But you served in our U.S. Marine Corps, and I was maybe somewhat surprised that you did not support or that all teachers that were properly trained could carry a gun if they chose to, or if they were approved to. Tell us what your position is on that issue, and maybe I'm going to express some personal opinion here, which is probably not my role here, but I'm going to do it anyway. But in the tragic Sandy Hook, Connecticut situation, the only thing that would have helped those kids and teachers is if a teacher actually had a gun and could have preemptively done something in that situation. Tell us how you see that, if you don't mind.
Sure. Well, I will not be recommending to the school board that we permit teachers to carry firearms. Okay. We have the benefit of a county commission that has seen a need and has fulfilled that need by providing school resource officers, trained law enforcement officers in every one of our buildings. I think I bring a unique perspective to the table, having been a Marine, a retired Marine now. There is a huge difference between having a firearm carry permit and being able to look someone in the face and pull the trigger. Marines have a hard time doing that. Mm-hmm. Law enforcement officials have a hard time doing it, and that's with constant training to do it. Teachers enter the teaching profession to teach students how to read, write, and do science. Mm-hmm. And while they may have a carry permit, I think it's unreasonable from my perspective to to put them in a position where they have to make a choice to use deadly force or not. That's not what they're trained to do. I do not believe that having a carry permit qualifies you to make that decision for others.
I appreciate that position much more now, and thanks for sharing that with us. Senator Johnson, how was that issue handled in the state?
Sure, and a couple of things I want to point out about the bill. Number one, it would have authorized local districts. Okay, we did not pass something that would allow this. This simply made it permissive to the local school board to allow. Another thing, quick clarification from what Dr. Looney said, is it doesn't just require a carry permit. It requires someone to have post-certified training. That is official law enforcement training. So you're talking about an individual who perhaps is a former police officer who left the police force and decided to go into education. So they have to be post-certified. It could be a sheriff's deputy, or it could be a revenue officer, someone who was an official in a law enforcement capacity, who is now educating. Mm-hmm. And then should the local district decide that they want to allow that to happen, then they have to go for additional training on top of that. So it's far more than just someone who has a carry permit. Again, I think it gets back to local control, and I think every district and every school is different. You've got some rural school systems out there. They can't afford to put SROs in every school. So they may want to pursue something along this lines. They may want to have a gym coach that's a former police officer, you know, because they don't have anyone else in the school to provide that type of protection, and have them go get that additional training and be armed in the school to provide some level of protection. So I think what we passed was a reasonable approach, which is to say, if you're going to do it, here are the standards you have to meet, and then we'll leave it up to the local school district, and then parents can call their school board members and make a case as to whether or not they think that it should apply in their district.
Right. Mr. Sargent?
Well, I think, I don't know if we ever made them go through the post-commission. That was one of the things I said we should make them have post-commission. I don't know if we made that part of the law. Now, I'm going to have to look that up, because you said, and I'm trying to remember. My big problem with that is I have my brother-in-law is a captain, retired captain of New York City Police Department. My two nephews are on the New York City Police Department. And the SRO officers are in uniform in a classroom. And when a police officer walks into a situation and two people have a gun, they're trained that they're the bad people. Now, how is this police officer going to determine and identify the teacher or the bad person? It's going to be a very difficult thing, because both are going to turn around and say, I'm the good guy. You know, if I'm the bad guy, I'm going to raise my hand and say, I'm the good guy.
Yeah.
And a police officer has to make that split decision, especially if I have 10 to 15 children in this same room. I don't know if, unless you have a lot of training, that you're mentally capable of making some of those decisions. Mm-hmm. And, you know, even in the Tennessee Highway Patrol, they have to retire at 55 years old. They cannot carry a gun. I believe the FBI is the same way. They have to retire because they don't want a 60, 65-year-old, a 70-year-old. Maybe the handshakes a little bit, maybe this and that. They don't want these people just walking around in law enforcement. And so we didn't put any type, we always said about a retired police officer or a retired Tennessee Highway Patrol. Well, we will not let them work as a highway patrol when they hit 55 and carry a gun. Most of them have to retire for that reason. But yet, we're turning around saying, well, possibly we would like these around our children. So it's something, you know, I definitely want local control of this. I think we're very fortunate here. I think the county commission, I give them a lot of credit for doing the County Mayor Roger Anderson for funding the SROs in all of our schools. And I grant you, there are not schools out there that cannot afford to do this. But I think we have to be very, very serious and very concerned in putting people in a life and death situation that are not trained that way. Our police officers are trained that way, our THP are trained that way, our FBI are trained that way. They're constantly in training where we cannot, I don't think we can send a teacher for 8 hours of training even once a year and then never put in a situation. So I'm very concerned for the safety of our children here in Williamson County. There again, I congratulate them for spending the tax dollars to do this. And
Right.
now, what I do in a Hancock County or Hawkins County where they don't have the money, that's something we're going to have to work on. But, I'm glad that Williams County said, they would fund the SROs. And I give them a lot of credit for that because that was, several $1 million as far as that's concerned. So we should be very thankful to our elected officials here for doing that.
Mr. Kester?
Briefly, and Jack, you hit it well. I was disappointed when we were debating this bill. The Tennessean only referred to it as hand carry permit. Well, that's not what we did, and I was but I guess not surprised that they would framework something that wasn't true and then attack that. Yes. This has only a very few will qualify. Obviously, in Williamson County, there's no need for it. We have police officers in our schools, thanks to the school board and thanks to the county commission. But there are rural areas that Charles has pointed out that there has to be a solution, and those that are trained ex-police officers are now teaching, and those type of individuals will fit that niche and make that coverage when it's needed.
Jeremy? Mr. Durham?
I looked at this as a way to allow local school boards to protect our children. Remember that any weapon or any plan that would be used would have to be approved by the school board. So that was the way that I looked at it when I voted yes.
Okay. I guess when you have hesitation about going forward with something, you probably best just keep your mouth shut. So I think I'll stop there. And we recently had a situation with a child that brought a gun to school, and there's just a lot of scary things going on regarding guns in schools, and I very much appreciate this forum that we have because it gives us an opportunity to hear more in depth what's going on behind these decisions that are being made so that we can actually understand them. Sometimes when you just read the news and see the headlines, it's hard to be happy about the way things are turning out. But I really appreciate the time that y'all give us here, and Dr. Looney, the time that you've given us this morning to help us understand these issues and how difficult it is to make these decisions from a statewide perspective and from a countywide perspective. We do have time for some questions. If anyone in our audience has questions this morning, what I'd like to do to begin to start with now is, Dr. Looney, is there anything else that from a state legislative point of view that you would like to address this morning? Is there anything?
Well, I would say
kinda
that
wrap up.
our local delegation does a good job of representing the views of the citizens in Williamson County, and we appreciate your support moving forward. We understand that education is a priority of the governor's, and we actually see eye to eye on 90% of what the governor proposes. We just ask that you bear in mind, do no harm locally. Do no harm locally.
Okay.
And so, sometimes we'll find ourselves at odds where it might be good for the state, but it's going to be really bad for Williamson County. And I encourage you gentlemen to be selfish and think about Williamson County first.
Senator Johnson, do you have a problem with that?
No, I don't, and that's kind of my philosophical take on it as well. Is I'm elected to represent Williamson County, but I'm also elected to try to make Tennessee the best state possible. So I think Dr. Looney summed it up right. We'll always put Williamson County first to the extent that we can, and again, thank our local folks here for doing the great job that they do.
Well, plus, let me say thank you to Dr. Looney. One thing that we've done now lately, we are meeting with the school board and the the parents' organizations, basically I'd say quarterly, I don't know if it's designed to be quarterly, on Saturday morning. And we'll sit down on Saturday morning and just have a frank discussion and what's happening in the state and, what the county and what the district needs. And it's just a good sounding platform that those that are elected locally are the closest to the people. And they're out with the people every day, where we believe we're out every day with the people, but when we're in sessions, we're in Nashville, we're not with the people on an everyday basis, where our teachers and our school board members are with the people, and our parents clubs are with the students and the teachers. So we've been very fortunate that we meet basically, I'd say, quarterly, and I think it's been a great forum for us to understand some of the situations that are happening in the local school district.
Good.
I believe, since this is Education Day, I think it's time to praise our directors of schools and our school boards. These folks, about every decision, they make half the population mad, and after 2 decisions, everybody's mad at them. And so we want to stand behind them and endorse them, because they lead the charge. And economics in this state is tied to education. And as companies and headquarters come to Williamson County over the other counties because of our strong families and strong education. And conversely, if you mess up the education part with high taxes and high regulation, you in turn will hurt your education by making your families unstable. So it's a balancing act, and it's a team, and a team that works very well, and I'm proud to be part of that team.
Right. Mr. Durham.
I want a petition to flip my and Glenn's seats, because I was going to talk about that too. It was the second time. But when jobs look at Tennessee, they look at Williamson County because of the same reason that I moved here, because of the schools. And I want to praise our teachers, our school board, our directors for doing such a great job. So pretty much what Glenn said.
I'll let Mr. Durham start on this next question I've got. So, so you won't have any time to think about it, Jeremy. But unless we've got about 10 minutes left, and I'd like to do a kind of a general wrap-up of this last session. And right at the end, everybody got in a big hurry, and there was a huge push to get out early, and I think that came from our Lieutenant Governor, is that right? And
Get out on time, not early. On time.
Was that good, bad? And from an overall session, how do you feel it turned out? And were there things that should have been done that shouldn't have been? Or what do you think?
I think it's always important to be efficient. You're talking about taxpayer dollars, because we have to pay more when we're in session. I think it was worth trying. We'll see if there's some bills that maybe should not have passed. I don't know of very many right now, but I think it was good that we tried it, and I think we'll know more in January whether it's something we want to continue on or not.
Okay. Mr. Castor?
I speak very favorably of what we did. The Speaker of the House, the Lieutenant Governor, wanted to be out in a fashion to show the taxpayers that we were conscientious of what we're spending, and yet at the same time to do a job well done. Now, we worked long, we worked hard, we pushed some people maybe harder than they wanted to be pushed, but we got done. We got done April the 19th, I think. We hadn't done that since 1990, and it's a good thing. Mark Twain once said, be cautious when the state legislature's in session, and we adjourned early and got business done and done right.
Good.
I would agree that, it's something they tried to say that possibly there wasn't 1 or 2 bills that couldn't have been worked out at the end. There probably were, but there's nothing that needs to be done this year that we cannot come back in January, February, and solve that problem. So overall, I think it's worked well. I hope next time they don't pick a day in itself or pick a time frame. We get down to days, everyone feels rushed to saying we're going to be out there on the 19th, although we passed the budget on the 17th, and that the only thing we have to do as legislators is pass a budget. Other than that, there really doesn't have to be 1 bill filed. We could go in, pass a budget, and leave, and not worried about passing 500 or 600 bills. So the only thing we have to do is pass the budget. So constitutionally, that's the only thing we have to do.
Right.
So, you know, I think we can do this, and part of the reason most people don't understand why we stayed around to May and June. This all started going back 98, 99, when we was having a revenue shortage, and what the purpose was, our tax collection dollars come in no different than the federal on April the 15th. So we wouldn't get these numbers until about May the 10th. So everyone wanted to stay in sessions to see if we had to make more cuts, or if we had more money, we could spend more money at the last minute. And that's where the date of May the 10th, May the 15th came from. Everyone was sitting around waiting for the revenue. What we've done now is we don't wait for the revenues. We set our budget with the revenues that we have predicted. And then if there's extra money comes in, we can't spend it. The governor just can't spend it, and the commissioners just can't spend this money. So that money sits there drawing interest, and in January, February, we put that in next year's budget. So, I mean, it's more of a logical approach now instead of just waiting and saying, if we have an extra $25 million, the habit was to wait around, see if they had an extra 25 and just spend it at the last 2 weeks. And that's not the way really of doing it. So I think the process and the system we're under is going to work, and it's going to be a good one.
Okay. Senator Johnson?
Well, in my experience, my first 3 or 4 years up there was a lot of hurry up and wait at the beginning of session. We would get up, we would convene, and speakers have to appoint committees, and sometimes people have to move to a different office because they became a committee chairperson, and they have to hire staff and that type of thing. But even with all of that, there just always seemed there was 2 or 3 or 4 weeks in there where we were meeting, we were having committee meetings, we were hearing some bills, but no one was in any real hurry to get to work. And so I think what our leadership was trying to do is let's get in and let's get to work right away. And let's eliminate those 2 or 3 or 4 weeks at the beginning of session where things are pretty slow. And that's largely what we did. And again, it saves taxpayers money. I agree with Mark Twain and Representative Cassida. The people of Tennessee are safer when we're not up there. And so we need to get in and get our work done and pass the budget and go home. Washington should do the same thing, by the way.
Amen. Thanks, sir. We've got in the audience our County Mayor, Rogers Anderson, and I see he looks interested and might have something that he could add to this discussion.
Well, let me say thanks to all of you for coming down, and to Dr. Looney for his comments, and David. And I'm going to put Dr. Looney and David, my comment is about budgets and what you guys can do to help us up there. Our budget is about 99.99% finished for this upcoming year. And so my question is, how much do you think the state government sends down to locals at Williamson County on a percentage basis? I'll let you off the hook not to get the dollars. Mike and I could probably answer that. But Dr. Looney, how much money do we get from state funding under the BEP funding?
Well, it's way short of 50% of our budget comes from the state government, and it's atrocious.
And I suspect that's about true for over here. So when you're talking about allocation of funding, the local taxpayers at 231 are funding 129 of that money, or they're funding well over 50% of that. And I appreciate your hard efforts. How about if we do something a little bit off the curve, a little bit different, and go back up in legislators this year? Great item that you were making about tying and indexing what we do on a performance basis to a certain percentage. We would receive that money, some more money, without raising taxes. You're reallocating. Now, I know you've got to go into those rural areas. You've got your peers, just like I have my peers, that we have to work with. But when you're talking about giving a 1.5% pay raise, which I don't know what David's were, because I don't work with him all the time, but I can assure you, Dr. Looney and I know what a 1.5% pay raise meant for state employees. They didn't get it here in Williamson County because we had to supplement that. Why is that important? Our total budget this year is going to be over $400 million. 260 of that's going to go to the schools. We do have less per student. That's a good thing. It really is. Dr. Looney may not agree with that, but that is a good thing. We're using our dollars to get the broadest return on our investment. So use a business model that allows the reward system like they do in, you've got several big businesses here this morning, they reward those things that are important as opposed to talking about the school systems that can't afford it. I've been there, and I understand we have to take into consideration the other schools, but if the school systems, but a large chunk of the Eric's and Dr. Moore's budget goes out in sales tax dollars. If we had more of that here, we could share some of that money with some of the other functions that we do across this county, whether it's our judicial system, whether it's our law enforcement community, whether it's our just a basic parks and recreation. So I submit to you that should be up on the table for you all to consider. I see Charles grinning. It's a hard one to get through because of BEP funding, because of TASER and all those rules and regulations. But that day has changed, and we need to change also. That's my comment.
We've got about 1 minute for each of you to respond to that comment. So
Let me start. This is the next step to high-performance school districts. I've looked at that, and we've talked a little bit about it, is that if you're a high-performance school district, you'll get flexibility and you'll get additional funds. And we're trying to work on a formula of graduation rates, ACT scores, and things of that nature. So there will be a quote carrot or a bonus for those 16 to 21 districts, and we'll know, probably in December, exactly what school systems are. And I totally agree with the county mayor is that we need to do a bonus system for the high-performance school district because they are doing the job better than anybody else in the state, and so they should be getting some kind of bonus or reward for doing an excellent job. So I think that we can incorporate that in. That's the first step of the high-performance school bill.
Okay. Senator Johnson?
Yeah, under the previous administration, there was some hostility towards Williamson County and other counties that are more prosperous, if you will. And in fact, I remember Charles nearly fell out of his chair when Governor Bredesen was delivering his State of the State address when he was proposing BEP 2.0, which robbed us of some of our BEP funding. And he said, if you want to know what's wrong with the way we fund schools, just look at how much money we give to Williamson County. He actually made that statement in a State of the State address. We don't have that hostility now under the current administration and under this General Assembly. So things like what Charles is proposing are very much on the table, and it's something that all four of us will be fighting for.
Gentlemen, have we covered that subject?
Well, we just have to remember that one of the reasons that we haven't done some of the things we're talking about is because of the court ruling. Memphis gets almost twice the money that we get because of a court ruling. So it's very complicated. It sounds great. It's just sometimes it's hard to do because of that.
Right.
I told Jeremy he could go first this time.
Thank you, Glenn. Appreciate y'all working that out. Dr. Looney, any final comment?
My comment would be, please, moving forward, don't sponsor any legislation that without talking to the school district elected leaders first. That would be my only request.
Lots more we could talk about, but our time's up. Really appreciate our state representatives being with us here and Senator Johnson. Dr. Lundy, very much appreciate your input this morning, and appreciate you all being with us. Hopefully, our tentative plan next month is to address the county budget, and we will hopefully be here on June 24th to try to unravel some of what's going on with the county from a budget point of view, see what's new this year, what's changing, and talk about that at this forum. So hope you'll be with us then. Look forward to seeing you next time. Thank you very much.